Simon & Schuster Audio presents Star Trek New Frontier, Excalibur-Restoration by Peter David. Read by Joe Morton.
She knew he was coming before she even saw him. It wasn't unusual for her to feel that he was approaching. Truth be known, most days she would get a cold feeling in the base of her spine. At those times, wherever she was, whether it be doing chores in her rundown abode or standing on the cracked and arid plain that constituted what she laughingly referred to as her property, she would stop what she was doing and wait to see if some sign of him appeared on the horizon. Most times, he did not. On such occasions, the feeling would naturally pass, and she would return to whatever it was she had been doing. In short order, she would forget that she had felt any sense of dread at all. This time, however, when she did see him making his approach, naturally all those false alarms were forgotten. Instead, all Rila could think was, "I knew it. I can always tell when he's coming." A gentle breeze was wafting across the plain, which was an unusual enough event in and of itself. She straightened the strands of green hair that were blowing in her face and turned back to the house. It was not much more than a hut, although it was built of sturdy enough materials that managed to keep the interior remarkably cool despite the crushing heat. Just to provide a bit of style, she had even constructed a small porch in the front of the hut. She now sat on the edge of the porch, arranging her hands neatly in her lap and staring out at the emptiness of her land. She had a sense of which direction he was going to come from, and she stared off that way in contemplation. Every so often she would glance down at her hands, turning them over and studying them as if she was looking at someone else's hands. They were leathery and weather-beaten. When she had been a little girl, her skin had been so fair, so pale, but now it was such dark brown that it seemed as if the sun had baked her as thoroughly as it had the land around her. It was amazing, though, that the vegetation, her crops, was still fighting resiliently for life. They poked up through the cracks, green and brown cacti-like plants. They were going to need water, though, and very soon. It wasn't just her crops either. She had been hearing as much from other homesteaders as well. They spoke to her, as always, with that telltale look of annoyance and resentment, even as they talked wistfully of the rain that was needed in order to salvage their crops. She looked to the sky, trying to feel the moisture in the air in her bones. Nothing was forthcoming, but she could have sworn that the intensity of the heat was growing, rolling in waves off the land. Not for the first time, she felt a sense of vague despair. She didn't simply reside on the world of Yakoba, she fought it. She struggled with it every single day. Although she continued to sit on the porch, she still shielded her eyes with one leathery hand while studying the horizon line. Ironically, she knew what she was going to see before she actually saw it. Sure enough, there he was. Tepenza. Tepenza's skin was not a golden bronze color due to the sun. Instead, much of the paleness that was typical for those of the Yakoban race was still present. Not unusual, then, that Tepenza was clad appropriately with a wide-brimmed hat and long coat that flapped in the steady breeze as he sped toward Rila's hut. He was clutching onto the rigging of his customized sail skipper, guiding it with an expert hand. Rila had to give him that much. When it came to sail skippers and similar desert transportation, Tepenza was second to none. A smaller form was clutching onto the mainmast of the sail skipper. Moch? She had been absolutely positive that her son had been indoors napping, but it was unquestionably Moch clutching onto the sail skipper.
Ma! Look, Ma!
For a moment, Rila was convinced that the sail skipper was going to crash into the side of the house. And then Tepenza whipped it around. Moch jumped off the sail skipper and ran excitedly to his mother.
You righted, Ma. Master Tepenza said he would take you.
Tepenza smiled. Titles are never necessary among friends, Moch. A simple Tepenza will do. Yet his gaze was not upon the son, but upon the mother. Rila returned his gaze. Quite expertly guided, Master Tepenza. However, considering I was under the impression that my son was indoors, I am most curious as to what he was doing sailing around the desert with you. Tepenza bowed deeply. You're asking the wrong person, Rila. I happened upon young Master Moch wandering about on his own. Rila shifted her gaze to her son.
Moch? What were you doing out? It's the hottest part of the day.
Moch shrugged. Rila took him firmly by the shoulders.
Why were you out?
Moch took a deep breath.
Looking for Dad. I didn't find him, did I? 'Cause I thought maybe Master Tepenza... No, Master Tepenza is not Daddy. Are you sure, Ma?
To Rila's surprise, Tepenza stepped in. If I was your father, Moch, I would never have left. Much to Rila's relief, the response seemed to satisfy the boy. Rila ruffled the hair on his head.
Go in now. You're overheated.
As Moch darted inside, Tepenza smiled. My home is considerably cooler. Yes, I am well aware of that, Maester. Tepenza didn't seem to be showing any intention of departing. She cocked one eyebrow in curiosity. Something else, Maester? The child should be entitled to know who his father is. Does he? Her temper flared.
That is between Moch and me.
And me, Rila. The people of Narin are likewise curious. People fear that which they do not know.
Maester, what do you want of me?
You know what I want, Rila. You provide a service for which you charge nothing. That is foolishness. Rila was only half listening to him now. Instead, she was starting to detect the first bits of moisture. She licked her dry lips and looked to the skies, reaching out, gathering strength, as Tepenza continued speaking. Rila, the average person in Narin does not understand your altruism. Rila nodded. But you, Maester, are not an average person. You are the most successful businessman in Narin province, possibly in all Yakoba. So you would be far more likely to understand it, yes? Oh, yes, but that does not mean that I endorse it. When you treat people with such compassion, they are reminded of their own shortcomings. Now, commerce, trade, self-benefit, these are the things which they can appreciate. If you charged them, they would come to love you. She took a deep breath to steady herself. Small dust devils were whirring across the plain. Tepenza didn't seem to be paying attention. Rila, it saddens me to see you so stubborn. I can provide you with a better home, better opportunities for yourself, for Moch. You have no reason not to take advantage of that which I'm offering you. No reason except that I do not trust you and therefore would not join you in business. And I do not love you and therefore would not join you in bed. Startled, Tepenza noticed the darkening of the skies for the first time. The wind was coming up even more fiercely than before. Sudden gusts caught up the sails of his vehicle. He bolted for it as large droplets of water began to fall from the sky. The sail vessel was not designed to handle easily in such fearsome winds. All Tepenza could do at that point was hang on for the ride. And Rila, for the first time in quite a while, felt the urge to laugh without question or restraint. The rain came down even harder, and still she remained outside, allowing it to soak her through.
Ma!
Moch bolted off the edge of the porch, ran to her, clasping her hands in his small ones, and they danced with one another in delirious circles of joy. In the city of Narin, the rain was coming down just as fiercely, and Maestress Koffiel was not impressed. She watched through her window with disgust. People were running about as quickly as they could, turning and somersaulting. Many had already stripped down to their undergarments and were dancing about like mindless heathens. In the meantime, the water collectors were doing their job. All of them fed into the underground reservoir from which the residents of Narin, as well as the farmers in the outlying regions, got their supply of H2O. The reservoir had, in recent years, dropped lower and lower. But then had come Rila, and everything had been different. Mistress Caulfield bolted out the front door and into the street. Her feet sunk partway into the mud. The revelers did not see her at first, but then someone noticed, and very quickly the word spread. Mistress Caulfield was not one to mindlessly join in the celebrations of others. The Mistress was said to be older than dirt, and considering the amount of dirt they had in Narin, that was pretty damned old.
Look at yourselves, gallivanting around like imbeciles.
Praester Milos, an older gentleman and the town's political leader, stepped forward.
Mistress, celebration is good for the soul, is it not? Not when the celebration stems from obvious efforts to corrupt morality, and we all know of the immorality that poisons the woman known as Rila. You should be ashamed. I am a mistress by birthright, by training, by tradition. Am I to stand by and watch you make fools of yourselves in celebration of a woman who is not entitled to such worship? Her powers can only come from darkness.
A voice came from the crowd.
How do we know?
The Mistress could scarcely believe the question, since the answer was so obvious.
How do we know her powers come from darkness? Isn't it obvious? We are all of us in this town Kolker-fearing good people. If beings such as us were meant to have such powers, why wouldn't right-thinking, upstanding, morally straight people be given them? Why not me, or the Praester, with whom I may have my share of disagreements, but still seems to me a good and right-thinking man when all is said and done?
Milos bowed deeply.
High praise indeed, Mistress.
Water dripped off the top of his head when he bowed, and self-consciously he brushed it away as she continued.
Isn't it obvious that the very fact that she has this ability, and we do not, means that it is inherently evil? Do not let yourselves be caught up in her obvious chicanery. I know how difficult it is. I know how tempting it is to embrace the convenient. My lips know the same thirst, my throat the same part sensation as your own. If we suffer together. But we should not allow the temptations of one woman sway us into thinking, even for a moment, that Kolker above would support such abominations. And have you not considered the fact that since Rila came here, the rainfall has been even less than usual? Who is to say that she herself is not causing the extreme conditions?
Her eyes swept the crowd.
If she is capable of bringing us rain, why is it so difficult to believe that she can also deprive us of it? Go to your homes, get cleaned up, go about your business.
The people of Narin headed for their homes. The Mistress did not move, but instead simply stood there and watched them go. She knew them. She knew them all too well. Oh, they would make noises of repentance and claim that they felt badly for what had transpired. But the truth was that they were willing to tolerate Rila, and the Mistress knew that the time would come when she would have to do something about it. And when she did, that would definitely be the last anyone heard of the Weather Witch who called herself Rila. Captain Elizabeth Paula Shelby, newly installed commander of the Exeter, looked up at the woman seated across the desk from her. Commander Alexandra Garbeck had come extremely, highly recommended. Slim, bordering on diminutive, she nevertheless possessed an air of quiet authority. Garbeck leaned forward.
Captain Shelby, what was he really like? Mackenzie Calhoun.
Shelby had been studying Garbeck's file on the computer screen, but now she turned and looked squarely at the woman she was interviewing.
Tell me, Commander Garbeck, do you think my views on Mackenzie Calhoun are remotely relevant to your interview? Look at it this way, Captain. If I am indeed made your first officer, as I am hoping will be the case, I wish to learn more about Captain Calhoun, and, in particular, the circumstances involving the destruction of the Excalibur. I've read the transcripts of the hearings, the discussions, but there seem to be things missing. If something occurred that was preventable, I want to know how to prevent it, so that my ship and crew does not fall victim to the same fate.
Shelby nodded.
Are you familiar with a file known as the Double Helix Incident? Of course, Captain. A technovirus designed to essentially collapse every computer base in the entire Federation, sending it spiraling into chaos.
Shelby allowed a small smile.
A very decorative way of putting it, Commander. The Excalibur, as it so happens, was squarely in the middle of it. Unfortunately, we didn't realize that there was a secondary virus also implanted within the ship's computer. The virus created a sort of internal null field around itself. So any attempts to spot it resulted in those attempts reflecting back upon themselves. Once the virus had, over time, thoroughly ingrained itself into every aspect of the Excalibur's system, it triggered a self-destruct sequence, setting the warp core to overload.
Garbeck's eyes widened. It was obvious that Garbeck was wondering how Shelby could have survived. Then Garbeck's eyebrows puckered slightly in thought.
The life pods. But let me guess. The auto-eject sequences on the life pods were also shut down, which would have meant that the only way to do it would be to employ the extreme option of individual manual override on each of the pods.
Shelby nodded.
Right. We started loading crewmen into the life pods and ejecting them as fast as we could. The problem is, the manual ejection of the life pods has to be done from within the ship itself, at the life pod stations. In any event, the crew acted smoothly together, helping each other into the pods, ejecting them from the ship to a safe distance. Eventually, though, it came down to Captain Calhoun and I. Naturally, he...
Alexandra Garbeck didn't say anything at first.
I'm sorry for your loss, Captain Shelby. However, the standard period of time between the realization of a warp core breach and the subsequent detonation of the ship is, at most, 5 minutes, 11 seconds. 5 minutes to get the crew, the entire crew, into life pods? To eject them?
Shelby shrugged.
You would be amazed, Commander, how fear of imminent death can lend wings to one's feet. Now then, enough of me, let's talk about you. Fast track for promotion. Double majored at the Academy in both science and tactics. You're too perfect. What's wrong with you, Garbeck? Nothing, Captain. It's a curse. I've learned to live with it.
Shelby laughed. She found herself liking Garbeck, who then told her,
Captain, it's very simple. I come from a long line of Starfleet officers. That is my true home, and that's where I'm supposed to be. I know every regulation backwards and forward. I know the case history of every major first encounter situation that every Starfleet captain has ever had.
Shelby nodded.
I've prided myself on that for a very long time, Commander. Familiarity with rules, regulations.
Garbeck looked questioningly at Shelby.
But Captain Calhoun didn't. Well, I have no wish to speak ill of the dead. No need to speak ill, Commander, if what you're saying is the truth. Captain Calhoun had only passing interest in regs, as if he took pride in finding ways around them.
Shelby was surprised to hear herself speak in a tone of such gentle amusement. When Calhoun had been around, and she had served under him, she'd found his attitude to be nothing less than relentlessly aggravating.
If I may ask, Captain, considering your record of adherence to regs, and the fact that your personal relationship with Mackenzie Calhoun ended badly, why did he make me his number one? I think it came down to the concept that he needed someone whom he could tolerate, and who could, in turn, tolerate him. So, tell you what, Garbeck. Congratulations. Welcome aboard the Exeter as First Officer.
That night, Shelby lay on her bed and told herself,
I'm not going to do it tonight.
And yet no matter how many times she thought about it, she kept wondering, What if there had been something she'd overlooked? What if there had been a way to save the ship? To save him? All the life pods were launched but two. One for the second-in-command, one for the captain. Except someone needed to stay behind and provide the manual launch. I knew he was never going to allow it. Mac, I'm not leaving.
Now, Epi, that's an order. The captain goes down with his ship.
There's no up or down in space, Mac. And suddenly, just like that, he was kissing me. He lifted me up in his arms, and the son of a bitch threw me into the space pod. As I landed, he lobbed something gently in my direction. It clattered on the floor, and I looked down and realized that it was his short sword. He'd been carrying it with him the entire time. It represented a direct link to his youth on Xenix, and he wasn't about to let it go up or down with the ship. It was as if it was the only tangible aspect of him that was of any importance. And if it managed to outlast him, then in some way, he would live on. The last view I had of him just before the door closed was Mac mouthing words to me. The impact of the shockwave from the Excalibur's warp core explosion sent my pod tumbling end over end. At that moment, though, I didn't care whether I survived. But floating there in the escape pod, waiting for the rescue, I came to a self-realization. I loved him. Not much time passed, and Starfleet sent a ship to retrieve us from the depths of space. And who should it be but, naturally, the Enterprise? When I briefed Captain Picard on what had happened, I could tell that he was upset. And why shouldn't he have been? After all, he was the one who first discovered a young warrior named Ma'aka Enzi of Calhoun, and convinced him that he had a place in Starfleet. I mentioned to Picard that Mac had mouthed something to me just before the door closed. Picard asked me about it. I told him, Mac said to me, I love you. Picard nevertheless smiled slightly at that.
Indeed. That's typical for Mac, isn't it? Master of the well-timed bon mot.
I nodded. I suppose he didn't want to risk hearing my not saying it back. Picard considered that a moment.
Or else, Commander Shelby, he wanted to give himself incentive to come back and hear you say it.
Shelby reached under her bunk and pulled out the short sword that was the last remaining artifact, aside from her heart, that marked the passage through the world of one Calhoun. Damn you. It wasn't clear, even to herself, who she was cursing. Herself, or the deceased captain known as Mackenzie Calhoun. Moch was feeling rather proud of himself. He had managed to slip out of the house yet again without his mother noticing, and he was feeling utterly at ease in the infernally dry and overheated afternoon. A few days ago, he'd been watching his mother speaking with the sail skipper man, Tepenza. He seemed nice enough, but Moch's mother didn't seem to like him. Was Tepenza his father? Moch didn't think so. Moch had reoccurring dreams about having a father. In those dreams, his dad was always tall and straight and proud, and he had eyes like storms and a smile as gleaming as the morning sun. There was an oasis nearby, although from an actual water point of view, it wasn't much of an oasis. Most of the plant life was brown and unappealing. However, there were a few rock formations that Moch enjoyed climbing, so it was one of his favorite places to go. One of his secret places, which he never even told his mother about because a boy is entitled to keep some things private. He got to the oasis and, even as he started to clamber up one of the rock formations, he wondered why it was that people always seemed to be muttering about his mother and him. What had they ever done to anybody? Why, his mom made water for them. Or at least she encouraged it to rain, and the clouds seemed to listen for the most part, although sometimes she was luckier than other times. The problem was that she usually could only make it rain for a short while, and the effort cost her mightily. She would take long naps, although she showed an almost supernatural ability to rouse herself to wakefulness any time that Moch made the slightest attempt to depart the domicile. but this most recent endeavor appeared to have taken more out of her than usual, perhaps because there had been so little raw weather material to work with. Because she had been sleeping so soundly, Moch had been able to follow his own instincts and set off on his own little adventure. He had toyed with the notion of going into town and asking people directly why they had a problem with his mom and him. Suddenly, a firm hand had grabbed him by the back of his shirt. Moch's feet pinwheeled in midair, and then he was whirled around. He let out a choked sob and looked into a twisted and furious face. The man had a scar that ran down the right side of his face. His face was dark-skinned, blistered, and red and bruised.
Where am I? What planet is this?
The man's question made no sense to Moch at all. The man was like no one else Moch had ever seen in this world. Was it possible?
Dad?
The man froze, his face right up against Moch's.
Zion? You're alive?
The man thought Moch was someone else. His son, presumably, who had apparently perished. Besides, who knew? Maybe the man was right. Maybe Moch really was his son. The only one who would know for sure was his mother.
Let me take you home to Mom. She'll want to see you.
The man gaped at him.
Your mother's here too? Am I dead? That's it, isn't it? I'm dead.
Moch took the man's hand.
You're not dead, you're just confused. Let me take you home. Do you have a subspace transmitter or beacon at home?
Moch thought about the large illuminating lamp that his mother kept in one of the kitchen cupboards for emergencies. She referred to that as a beacon.
Yeah, we do.
Whatever menace there had been about the man was gone now. The man steadied himself by putting a hand on Moch's shoulder, and they started to move across the plains. It took a horrifically long time. The man would mutter things that Moch couldn't follow. Stuff about the ship and blowing up and pods and epi. None of it made the least bit of sense. Moch wondered what his mother would say. For a little while at least, Moch would fantasize what it would be like to be with his dad. And that was the greatest adventure of all. Moch brought the man to the small shed where they kept an assortment of their supplies, including the lucab, a large, hairy, four-legged thing with rock-like skin and a large tusk that was handy for a rider to hold on to. Moch eased the man into the coolness of the shed.
I'll get Mom.
Moch shut the door behind him and raced toward his house. He bolted into the house, looked around frantically for some sign of his mother, and didn't see any. It was at that point that he heard his mother's scream. Rila had been frantic with worry, looking for Moch. She had started walking east but turned up nothing, and so she decided to head back the way she'd come. It was starting to get cooler, which meant that the lucab would be far more willing to come out of its nice, cool shed and provide her with a means of locomotion. On her return, she went straight to the shed and threw open the door. A man was lying on the floor. Slowly, he sat up. His skin color, his hair were both wrong. He had to be some sort of genetic freak capable of who knew what. There was a crazed look in his eyes, feral and ugly. She tried to gather her wits. Now, just stay where you are.
Dan Terry Slime, you killed my father!
Suddenly, he leaped right for her. For one crazed moment, she thought he was going to rape her, and then when his hands clamped down on her throat, she realized that he meant nothing less than to kill her.
Dan Terry
He kept
Slime,
raging about Dan Terry, and she had no idea what in the world he could possibly be talking about.
Mom!
Moch was right there, shoving at the man, trying to get him off her. The crazy man swung his arm around, knocking Moch off his feet. Rila's world started to gray out around her. The lucab was suddenly heading away from the scene at a fairly brisk gallop, and attached to the creature's tusk was one end of a rope. The other end was secured around the man's ankle, and he was howling in fury as the creature hauled him around. Moch ran to her, and his words were tumbling out so fast that Rila had trouble understanding everything that he was saying.
She could make out a couple of things like, "I'm sorry, and the man wasn't so bad when he wasn't trying to kill you, Ma." That was when the Lucab trotted up to them, the man clearly unconscious. His clothes were now shredded, his face and upper body bruised. "Moch, we have to get the Magister." "The Magister? But Mom, he'll put him in jail." Rila pointed at her throat. "He belongs in jail, Moch. If you hadn't thought so fast, tied him to the Lucab, I'd be dead by now." As soon as the man was tied up, Rila dragged him over into the shed, secured the door, and locked it for good measure. Then she and Moch mounted up on the Lucab and headed toward town as fast as they could. And as they did so, the man with the purple eyes and fearsome scar dreamed of exploding ships. Shelby could scarcely believe it. She sat in her command chair on the Exeter, the steady flow of activity all around her, and she was reveling in it. And it was so quiet. It had seemed back on the bridge of the Excalibur that there was always someone chattering or going on about something that had nothing to do with anything. There would be Leffler reciting one of her many laws about something or other, or McHenry snoring at his post. But here, on the Exeter, it was so very, very, very quiet. The crew, hand-picked by Shelby, went about its business with calm, certain efficiency. Everything her crew said or did directly related either to the current state of the Exeter or updates on the ship's position while the powerful vessel continued en route to the planet Makus. At the science station, Lieutenant Commander Chris Tully turned to her from his post. "Captain, atmosphere survey complete. Makus's air is a bit thinner than Earth's standard, but should not present a problem." Garbeck turned in her seat to face Shelby. "Will you be handling the away team yourself, Captain?" "I had intended to. Does that pose a problem for you, Number One?" Shelby had decided she liked that term. Picard had referred to Riker in that way, and it had a good sound to it. "No problem, Captain. This does not seem to have a good deal of potential for personal danger, so I don't see the harm." Makus. Shelby was going to Makus. It wasn't what she had been planning. Somehow, Shelby had just assumed that, with the loss of the Excalibur, she would be assigned back into Section 221G, formerly known as Thelonian Space. She had raised a mild protest with Admiral Jellicoe, who had told her that Starfleet was not going to reconfigure an assignment list just to accommodate a single officer. He had told her that they were likely going to be christening a new vessel as Excalibur that would probably go back into Thelonian space. So far, during her first command on the Exeter, things had gone fairly smoothly, and Shelby was certainly hoping that the planet Makus would fall into that same category. Makus was a world on the outer edge of Sector 47B, and it was now felt that the people of Makus had advanced to a sufficient degree that they were ready to be given the opportunity to join the Federation. It was an exciting prospect for Shelby, being sent to handle the invitation personally. If her invitation got Makus to join the United Federation of Planets, who knew where the world might end up in terms of its involvement with and relation to other worlds? And their success would be, in some small measure, Shelby's success. In the city of Narin, Magister Ferax had been in charge of enforcing the law for 3 years, 9 months, and 1 day. For the most part, he found the residents provincial, quick to anger, quick to judge, and slow to extend compassion. The only one he found particularly tolerable was that woman, Rila, the one who had a little place by the outskirts. Rila, the rainmaker. She had brought rain cascading down in torrents for the benefit of the people, and in return, they had given her suspicion and scowls. He had once asked her why she did it. "Rila, if you packed up and left tomorrow, these folks wouldn't be the least bit sorry to see you gone." "That's as it may be, Magister, but they would miss the water I bring them. So in that way, they'd miss me." Since that time, he had made it his particular province to keep a special eye out for her, since she struck him as a special kind of woman.
So when she had contacted Magister Farax about the strange man whom Moch had taken it upon himself to bring home, naturally the Magister attended to it as quickly as humanly possible. In no time at all, he had ridden out to Reela's homestead and rustled up the mysterious stranger who was unconscious and tied up in her shed. Farax needed to take no more than a single look at the man to know that he was not, to put it mildly, from around there. His skin, his hair, everything was simply wrong. He did not dwell on it, though. That was not his job. Nor did he worry too much about the fact that the man, at least that was what he appeared to be, was clearly ill, for that was also not his job. His job was to protect, and the best way to protect others from this newcomer was to make certain that he was put where he could do no harm to anyone. That, of course, meant jail, which was exactly where he put him. The newcomer made no protest, offered no resistance on the trip back into town. He simply lay slumped over the Magister's own lucab, a larger, hardier version of the one who resided in Reela's shed, for the length of the journey, at most offering some muttered comments along the way that resulted more from matters flittering through his dreams instead of anything having to do with the real world. Once he got the man back to the jailhouse, which was also where the Magister had his office, the Magister tossed him into a cell and slammed the door. From that point on, the Magister simply waited for the newcomer to die. He was not a medman, and the medman was not due back in the area for some weeks yet, so the newcomer lay unattended and feverish, still tossing about on the narrow platform that served as a bed in the cell. After a short time, the Magister became accustomed to the moaning that arose from the cell. Unfortunately, Cusack, who was in the cell near to the newcomer, was having a bit more difficulty than the Magister when it came to ignoring him. Cusack made it quite clear to the Magister that he was not appreciating the new setup one bit. The Magister had put Cusack in jail when Cusack had been foolish enough to kill a man named Turkin over a game of cards while in the Magister's presence. Farax had simply no choice but to arrest the stupid sod. Cusack's beefy hands were each wrapped around one of the bars on the cell door.
How am I supposed to sleep, Magister? I shouldn't be here in the first place. When my brothers catch wind of this...
When your brothers do, they'd be best advised to leave bad enough alone and not make it worse.
Late one evening, not long after Farax had incarcerated the newcomer, he was sitting in his office minding his own business when he heard a slamming against the cell door from inside. Pulling his blazer from its holster, he rose and stepped through the door to the adjacent area where the cells were. There he saw the newcomer, his eyes wide and wild, clutching the door bars and looking around as if he was some sort of caged animal.
The pods are all gone. Crew is in them. All of them. Had to be done manually. Shuttle bay, only hope.
Cusack moaned from the cell next door.
Dear Colker, shut him up, Magister.
You shut up, Cusack.
Farax found what the newcomer said extremely fascinating. He spoke to the sick man.
You're in the shuttle bay. Are you leaving the ship?
The newcomer shook his head fiercely.
Trapped. Bay doors are not responding. Make it work. Got to. Blow it open.
The scar-faced man threw himself against the jail door, again and again.
Shields gone. Navigation out. Comm out. Barely holding it together. Force of explosion. Propelled. No idea where. No idea. Lost. Can't get my bearings. Planet ahead. Don't know it. Trying to hold it together. Fighting to get retros online. Slow it down. I'll burn up if I don't slow down. Got it. Like flying a brick. Hitting atmosphere. On fire.
And that was when something jogged in the Magister's memory. A few days ago, he'd been sitting out at sunset looking at the night sky and seen something that bore a resemblance to a shooting star. Was this man some sort of outer space creature? As quickly as the thought crossed the Magister's mind, he shook it off. He was simply not given to flights of fancy. Then the newcomer toppled over. Cusack looked at the Magister.
Is he dead?
The Magister shook his head.
Nope. Don't appear to be.
What if he dies?
Then we bury him and move on. He did not, however, die. The next morning, not only did the magister see his strange prisoner alive, but awake and sitting up and, other than his odd coloring, looking fairly normal. The first thing that struck the magister was how the gaze of the purple eyes seemed to pierce him.
How are you feeling?
The purple-eyed man blinked very slowly.
Damp. I appear to have sweated through everything I have on.
The man glanced around.
Where am I? You're on the planet Yakoba, in the city of Narin, in my jail.
The man's fists gripped the bars, testing their strength.
Which would seem to indicate, in your eyes, that I am a criminal.
Magister nodded.
Correct? You attacked a woman, tried to kill her.
That seemed to startle him.
That is unfortunate. I was not myself. Really. And may I ask who you yourself are? Calhoun. Mackenzie Calhoun. Just passing through, are you? In a manner of speaking, yes?
The magister leaned back in his chair.
Well, Mackenzie Calhoun, it would seem that you're not going to be passing through quickly. I'm not a threat to anyone. Thing is, Mackenzie Calhoun, that's not up to either you or me. You're guilty of trespass and assault. Only the circuit judiciary can set the charges aside. I was injured, feverish, possibly even concussed. Have something to do with your crashing shuttle?
That obviously caught him off guard. Calhoun looked at the magister with surprise and even a bit of respect.
When can we talk to this circuit judiciary? When he comes through this way on his circuit. About 5 months.
Calhoun simply processed the information and announced,
So you're saying that I've no choice but to wait?
The magister smiled.
Yes, as a matter of fact.
Calhoun shook his head.
That is unfortunate for you. You seem a decent enough man. I would not like things to end badly for you.
The magister's smile evaporated, and he didn't look directly at Calhoun for the rest of the day.